Hello and welcome to Nauze Cast. I'm your host Nauze, and today I have here with me Saliient91, author of Harry Potter and the International Triwizard Tournament, and an ongoing and very mysterious and Avengers Anguish, co-author of the troll-defining Healer Harry and the unacceptably good Edelweiss, according to Tal, with his wonder twin Taliesin. He has a bachelor's degree in bullshitting and a PhD in trolling. He has written over 700,000 words since he started his fanfiction career, and he has graciously accepted to join us today. How are you, Sal, today?
Doing good?
Yeah? Everything's okay with your family?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Work's good. Kids are good. Life's good. Doing pretty good.
Very good. So, how did you get into fanfiction? When was that? How old you were?
Well, I was a broke student that had recently graduated with a wife that was still in university, and I had student loans and personal debt to pay out, and was finished university, so I've been late 2014 or early 2015, and I was trying to get back to playing video games, just doing things in my downtime when I wasn't working, and my wife was studying, and I was kind of just at home. And I thought doing something more productive, like reading, might be a bit healthier than gaming. And I just also didn't really find that gaming was really, I couldn't really do it for more than an hour or two before I started getting bored. So I decided to start reading, with the problem being that I had no money, and going to the local library didn't sound very appealing. And so I thought, well, fan fiction is supposed to be pretty good and it's free. Let's see if I can find something.
And which fandom did you jump into at first? Harry Potter directly or something else?
No, it was definitely Harry Potter. I'm not really very well read in things that are in the fan fiction world outside of Harry Potter. I mean, Game of Thrones, that series, or the Song of Ice and Fire series, I've read that one once, quite some time ago. Most of the other major fantasy works I strictly just haven't read, and a lot of the TV shows and things they push into it, again, I just haven't watched or read. So Harry Potter was pretty much it, and what I was looking for was I was trying to find like canon continuations. Like I figured somebody would have said, that the epilogue was complete trash. Let's just continue right from cut that and then just continue. And I searched on Reddit to see if I can find something like that.
With Genie Fix.
Well, yeah, straight canon continuations to start. And there's a few of those that I found on Reddit, and then started reading Harry Genie Fix, and then kind of broadened my horizons from there.
How soon did you change from Genie and to Fleur or other pairings?
Well, there was an order to that. So first was Ginny, and then I started reading strictly mostly canon, or canon and rehash, and then more into starting the alternative universe Ginny Fix.
Okay.
And then I started running out of decent-ish Ginny Fix, or at least it was hard to find ones that weren't trash quality. So I decided, well, maybe we'll try a different character, and I thought, well, Fleur's rather different, so I went for Fleur next.
Yeah, and we all know how that came out. So, when did you thought it was a good idea to? When did you want to start writing, even if you weren't going to publish or not? But when did you thought you could simply I gotta try writing something?
I think it was maybe either really late 2016 or sometime in 2017, where I just kind of had the idea where I was kind of searching for a fiction to read, but I couldn't find this specific twist on it, or I'd read a fiction that wasn't finished, or sometimes I'd read a fiction and they would take a direction I wasn't unhappy with, and then I would just kind of think, what would happen, if they'd done this differently, or what if you take that third year series gets free and decides to help Harry a little more, and they did this or something the specific starts that people use all the time, fourth year or fifth year kind of ones, and just what if they started there, and how would that kind of work? And so I would just I wouldn't write, that's definitely not the right word for it. I would kind of bullet point some of my own thoughts kind of on it, because I did it a few times, and I was like, well, what did I think last time? I don't remember. So I kind of wrote it down, but it's really rough bullet points. There's not there's no dialogue in there or anything like that.
Just really what you thought would happen. Just the basics.
Yeah,
just the skeleton.
Straight plot.
Yeah. I know you had some other stories that you never published, And when you started writing them, what made you think they weren't good enough to start to publish them? So what made you want to publish ITT? When did you decide that ITT was good enough for that? What made you think that?
It's not really, the question is slightly framed wrong, but not because it's a weird question, but because the way I decided to write ITT is different than just I decided to go with this idea. ITT was born out of a hodgepodge, like this max, all of these mishmash of ideas. That there was lots and lots of little plot points that I had, or things I wondered about. For instance, Cuddles, having like an actual little mini dragon familiar, like how that might work and things. That was its own little idea. How the chamber mechanics kind of worked. I had some thought processes on that, and that was in its own separate little like random idea spot. There was a number of different small things that were kind of all together, and I kind of pushed them together. I mean, there was some idea for some overarching plot, of course, between all of the ideas, but a lot of the things that went into it were actually really small ideas or different small things that I had, and they kind of pushed them all together. And as far as how it was like, I was like, maybe it's good enough to publish or anything, it wasn't so much that way. I thought I more considered that I could write better than some of the just terrible trash that I was willing to read. So if I was willing to read I was willing to read some bad stuff, then I could write at least that bad, and perhaps over time I could actually improve.
Yeah. Speaking of ideas, what do you consider a good idea enough to be worth exploring?
Well, I mean, it's got to be interesting to me. If an idea is not interesting to me, then I just discard it and move forward.
By interesting for you, what does interest you in particular?
Plot. It's generally always plot that gets me going and thinking. It's not so much relationships or pairings or I wonder what would have happened if Harry had gone back in time and if he was with his with the Marauders. Like, I just don't really think the relational aspect is much. Mm-hmm. For me, it's much more plot based. If the story has amazing characterization and really great writing, but it has just terrible plot, I'll probably drop the fiction and not be interested in reading it because it has terrible plot. But if something has just terrible characterizations, but it has great plot with interesting ideas, I would much rather read that. That's just the way I'm more wired.
Okay. And when you started writing, what was the thing you most focused on? Like, was the grammar, was the prose, was the dialogue? What was your, like, I gotta focus on this to learn this better and do this better? What was the first thing you tried focusing on?
Well, when I first started writing, I had no idea what I was doing. And I'd forgotten things that I should have remembered, like YOUR and YOU''RE are different words with different purposes. I'd completely forgotten that because in my line of work, I only use YOUR, and there's never a correct time to be using ''RE when addressing clients. So it's always the other one. So I just honestly just didn't pay attention, and I just started sending stuff out. So it was definitely not grammar. It definitely wasn't sentence structure or anything technical like that.
You didn't even know you existed, I suppose.
Yeah. I was never a very faithful student in attending English classes. I didn't even know what the word for alliteration was when I started writing again. I knew it was a thing because I remembered studying that in grade 8, but I didn't remember what it was called. So I did Google that and figured out it's alliteration.
Yeah, to be fair, me neither. I learned because of you mostly. Yeah. So, what is your writing process like nowadays? Now that you have a lot of experience, what is your process when you come home and you sit down and you write? What do you do? How many hours do you spend brainstorming? How is a normal day for you as far as writing goes?
Well, normal writing, generally, it'd be something similar to this, where I'm just sitting there, put some music on my headphones, and then I decide, I don't feel super tired, and my mind's a bit alert, so let's let's.
And do you
Normally,
do?
I just sit down and start trying to write. As far as planning, I'm probably a very poor planner in that regard. I think it's something I'm going to get better at. ITT had like really rough outlines for things, and most of the time when I'm writing towards a specific point that I'm kind of focused on. Like, it could be somewhere far in the future. It could be somewhere, say, 6, 7, 8 chapters down the road, or 3 or 4. It could even be 6 or 7 scenes down the road, or sometimes it's occasionally the scene that I'm in. But generally, I try and have a specific point I'm writing towards to kind of keep all of the chapters focused. Like, I want to get to the character in this state, in this place, and where do I need all the other characters, and what do they need to be doing? How do they need to change and go? And I generally just kind of have a couple ideas for scenes and then start trying to write them.
Okay. And how long do you usually spend researching stuff? Like, I remember when you were writing ITT about the ballerina dances, and do you always research that amount of stuff? How does it usually go?
It certainly depends. I mean, research. I was considering writing a Game of Thrones fiction in between, instead of Avengers, Anguish, and I didn't. Partly because I don't quite like the ending. It's a sad ending, and I don't want to read or write a sad ending. So that's part of it. And the other part is that I need to do a lot of research on the heraldry and all the houses and create the political system and recreate it and such. And I haven't read those books in so long, and it's not in the correct time period anyways. But I still need to figure out a lot of information. So that's part of the reason I didn't want to write that one, is just the amount of research. Research to me generally needs to have a purpose. So when I was writing ITT, and I covered in way too much detail and spent way too long on it, the dancing part, specifically the waltz, in the early chapters, part of the focus was that I wanted Harry to start to become a perfectionist. That settling to be average grades, mediocre performance, wasn't going to be enough for him, and he needed to show that. And part of the way of showing that was when he showed up to the Yule Ball, he was the best dancer there, the best male dancer, probably second best dancer beside Natalia. And that was kind of the point and the purpose of it. And so to show that kind of character change and growth, as the writer, I felt I needed to have an understanding of how the waltz works to such a degree that people would be able to read it and think that I was an expert. I didn't actually need to be an expert in it, but I need to, the characters... Yeah, make them believe it, or believe that I could write it with enough experience that the dance teacher could. So I could watch YouTube videos of actual lessons, because YouTube's awesome like that, the beginner lessons. Yeah. And then the teacher would be like, make sure you're paying attention to this, make sure you're doing that, make sure you're doing that. So I'm like, well, great, lacrosse. You can go and point out those problems to Harry. And, even at the really high-end professional, there's...
You cut out for a bit.
When did I cut out?
Professional.
Oh, the professional dancer part? Yeah. So the professional dancers you can find, or at least I found online, the choreographed routines. And so I took a few of them, mishmashed them together into, you can kind of see, like, they do this, then this, and this often, or like this, and then they go into this or that. Like, you can kind of see what, once you read enough or pay attention enough, what are transitional moves and that kind of thing. And I just kind of created a mismatch of different actual dances that somebody might do, and then I use that in ITT. So the point of the research for all of that was more just to make it seem to the reader like the characters knew what they were talking about and doing. I don't really feel like it was necessary to do research on other things, like the magic system and the world building, for instance, I just kind of made up all on my own. As far as research, I mean, there's some other fictions I've considered writing. One of them is a Lord of the Rings crossover, and I started reading the Lord of the Rings, like the Silmarillion, and listening to podcasts already, because I don't understand the world
at all
anywhere close to the depth of knowledge that I would like to know if I'm going to ever consider undertaking that. And the project is probably so large that it's going to be a while to consider it, and I'd need to make sure that it would probably take me a couple of years to write, so I'd have to be pretty committed to it, and I'm kind of hesitant to commit to something that large and that long term again.
Just the setting up is like at least 200k words. So yeah, the setup and everything. I mean, you're going into a world that people know, and I don't think you need the depth of knowledge that I would like to have before I would write something like that.
far, far greater than what actually needs to go into the fiction. I just personally didn't know enough about Tolkien's themes, like characters, some histories. I didn't know enough about characters that if I'm going to write them, and there's a very broad depth. Like Galadriel's a character that's been around since the Silmarillion. There's a lot of depth to her character, to her past, to family members that she had. And if you don't know that information and you don't know her background when she says things and does things in The Lord of the Rings, or if you're writing a fan fiction, there's just a lot to know about that character that will allow you to understand things better and write it better. So, I'm doing research. I've talked with a couple of people that know a lot more about Lord of the Rings than I do, and they've pointed me in directions of where I can learn. And I'm undertaking it, but that's just more also personal. Like, I like to read that stuff. I like that world. I've always enjoyed watching those movies, and I think I've read the trilogy and The Hobbit probably 3 or 4 times through.
Oh, wow.
Since I was a very young child. Like, my mom read it to me when I was growing up, so I'm quite familiar with them.
Oh, wow. I have only
just not the
read
depth.
Once. Speaking of enjoying the books from Tolkien, who would you consider your biggest inspiration in writing, or who has helped you most throughout your writing career?
Like inspiration in like the fan fiction world?
Either.
Well,
or out.
I'm remarkably unwell read outside of fan fiction, so I don't think Rowling is like my hero, and George R.R. Martin is definitely not. I don't think Tolkien, the type of writer he was and the type of writer I am, I wouldn't compare them, and I don't think my goal in life is to become like Tolkien or to write like him. I mean, be successful as him. Again, it's not really a goal of mine either, so I don't think any of the major authors outside of fan fiction are. And inside of fan fiction, again, my goal was never really to be popular or to try and write a fiction that's long or people enjoy, like that people, flock to or anything like that. Like, popularity is, something that kind of happened that. Yeah, it's certainly better that more people enjoy your fiction than less. Like, that's obviously great, and I'm grateful that people really enjoyed reading it, and I've got a lot of feedback on it, which has been good. But I don't know if there's any straight inspiration. I mean, as far as inspiration, maybe inspiration to get started by some of the terrible fan fiction writers that I figured I could be better than. It's a bit of a opposite answer.
Not exactly what, but I guess it works.
As far as I guess it kind of answers the question to a degree. People that helped me. I think definitely the first person that helped me the most getting started was Catherine 518.
Yeah.
She's just
right.
person.
For
and
those who don't know, she's the writer of I'm Still Here, one of the most popular fanfictions in the world, I guess.
Yeah, at one point it was rated #1 by follows. I haven't checked in too long to know, but it was. I reached out to her by PM on fanfiction, and she responded, and then said to add her to message her directly somewhere else. I did that, and she was just a great resource where I could ask a lot of questions. She read ITT, some of the early stuff, and I asked for an opinion, and she said she shouldn't give it because are real. Yeah, she didn't want to give her opinion because she's blunt and would just tell me what she actually thought. And to me, that's great. I didn't care if it was all negative, and she gave me her thoughts, and they ripped into my fiction like crazy.
Feedback is feedback.
And it made me I received negative feedback. I don't really, I see negative feedback. You gotta understand, like, feedback, if it's coming from a source where the person isn't trying to be intentionally mean and harmful, they're trying to help you to some degree. I mean, in fan fiction world, that's not generally on the fan fiction world. Like, negative feedback is very difficult because, at least to take anything productive out of it, because you don't know who's on the other side and you can't really trust their feedback. Some people take the great part of your writing and they give you negative feedback because they read the wrong thing into it, or they want, a power fiction where Harry just crushes everybody and bashes everybody, and your story actually doesn't do that. So let's say negative things. But when somebody is taking their time, that is more accomplished than you, is willing to, is willing to give some some feedback, even if it's all negative. To me, I mean, that's helpful. It's constructive criticism, and it's taken that way, at least by myself. If some authors say, your technical writing skills suck in this areas, I say, thank you. Like, do you know any resources that might be able to help me figure this out? Like, I don't care. I don't take feedback from people that know what they're talking about and be like, you're not very good at this, and I say, cool, how do I get better? Like, that's more of my question versus, I'm not gonna get upset or let my feelings really be hurt. I mean,
that's a good mentality.
when I first started, I knew I was going to be bad. Like, the reason I started with ITT is because I didn't, like, my favorite ideas, I didn't want to write first, because I knew, like, anytime you do a new hobby, if I decide to suddenly become, I will paint a terrible first painting. And the second one will be, almost as bad, and the third one then so forth. And, as you get better over time, and more practice, the better you get at it. So for writing, I knew my first chapters were going to be terrible. And that's why I never ever considered going back and rewriting them. Because for me to look back at ITT and consider rewriting it, it's like talking a different language.
Yeah. Especially
everything is so different how I write now versus how I was writing then, that I would just need to take the whole thing, retake the concepts, pull them out, and then write a new fiction.
Which would probably be really good, but, well, why?
No, I have no interest. Yeah. I mean, I've explored the plots and the topics that I wanted to writing in that one, and so I'm going to go back and do something. I want to move on to something new, and that's what I've done. Yeah, I mean, it's like negative. So Catherine, she said a number of things that were correct about my fiction that were not good, and gave me some websites to read into and check into, reading things about like body language and top 10 mistakes writers often make. Like, she did post them on the Discord eventually, or I posted them afterwards. But it's very helpful, and as a resource, I could ask questions about punctuation. I could ask questions about this and that. Not really specific anything to plot, but just writing tips in general.
Yeah.
And she was very wonderfully helpful, and I certainly was appreciative of that. The next major helpful person would have been Tal.
Yeah.
When we co-wrote together, because if you look at ITT and you look at Grow Young with Me, they're very different fictions. One is, heavily plot focused,
very character driven,
and the other is the opposite, character driven. And so for us to kind of work together, I'd never tried co-writing, of course, and I don't think Tal had either. So for us to kind of write differently, but also write in such a way that it meshes together so easily and seamlessly, and of course, I think our two personalities, being the same person, works very well together.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's helpful. But that was helpful as far as the editing. I got to see somebody that writes very differently than me edit through my work specifically, like making changes, and I could just say, well, what were you seeing there? And sometimes it's just matching styles, and other times it was adding different things or explaining different concepts. So that was incredibly helpful too.
Yeah, and then they're coming from a completely different background from you, so they're definitely getting ideas different than yours. So yeah, the co-writing was really interesting when you two started. So the mashing, the mixing of your styles was really nice to see. There's a lot of people who come to me asking how they get a beta, how to start writing with someone else they don't know. So could you explain a bit how you got betas and how usually that relationship goes, for those who don't know?
Well, my first beta, I think, was Hafni24 is the gentleman's name, and he PM'd me directly on fanfiction and asked if he could beta. He'd baited other authors before and offered to help, and so I said, well, why not? Worst case, it's on Google. I just hit undo all changes, and that's the end of it, and I don't have to worry about it. But he came on and helped, and part of the things that he did, he deleted a lot of my writing when I had way too high word count.
Yeah.
And and made plot to help, tried to help with plot and characters and things as well. And then he got quite busy, so that kind of ended that. Just wasn't able to beta at such a pace.
Yeah.
And then I picked up somebody else.
Very fast.
Yeah.
At the start.
Yeah. So I picked up somebody else. I'm trying to think what their name was. I don't have it in front of me, so it was I just think it put, I don't have a beta, or somebody PM me saying, I noticed you don't have a beta for the last couple of chapters, could you help? But that one didn't go very well because they wanted to trade and have me beta their work, and to be honest, I was very uninterested in their works, and I didn't really want to. I didn't mind doing beta maybe for somebody that their stories I quite enjoyed, because then I'd just be reading them anyways. But I wasn't really interested in that, and also, I needed a lot of help on the grammar and punctuation side at that time anyways, so it's not like I was going to be helping people fix that at that point. And the changes that they were making, they would take my Google Drive document and then send it back to me in a Word document, so I had to read side by side really carefully what they had changed, and I didn't that was terrible.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't like that. And then the changes that they were making were changes that I didn't appreciate, like plot changes, or just things that the author should be doing, not anybody else. So that didn't go super well, and so I just ended that one. And then I used to go, when ITT was first going, I was pretty surprised that people enjoyed it as much as they did.
It was very reading, even in the start was already very famous.
I was pretty surprised because I'd never done anything like that, so I was pretty grateful too. That's probably the word I would use, or just thankful that people enjoyed it. And I got a lot of negative feedback at the start, even too, where even today there's a guest reviewer that was going through and just saying they've left them straight, what are you doing? You're terrible, kind of reviews, and you just shake your head and whatever and continue on with life.
I basically never see you mention even a bad review, so that's surprising to me.
Yeah, I don't know, it just happens, and I don't really take them as somebody that I care about their opinion to me is nothing. So if they wanted to share that, then good on them. They shared it, and I don't agree with what they were. I read the first 2 or 3 reviews, and I thought, okay, this person's now just working through, and every 5-6 chapters they're writing a nasty review. So you just hit archive, okay, yeah, that person again, archive, I'm not even going to bother reading it when it's such ridiculous feedback, on that person. But yeah, when I was first reading it, there was quite a lot of support. I had a number of authors or people that I'd read their works that had reviewed, some that had, that I haven't talked about, that PM'd me directly, and sent some writing advice or things they noticed about it, because I think in some of the early authors' notes I'd commented, I'm brand new, if you have advice, send it to me. And some people did, and I'm always grateful to that. A fan fiction author community has been, fantastic to me, that they're always willing to help and point out issues and, help with writing, the Flower Pot beta channel, for instance. How many people there are willing to just sacrifice their time. So I've always been appreciative of that. And I wanted to let people know I was appreciative. I come from a business background, and, when people do a good job, you want to make sure you tell them, they've done a good job. So I would go and search on Reddit and just people that were recommending my fiction and saying positive things, and I would just say thanks for reading, essentially. And that's how Nauze was saying something about my fiction, and I PM'd him and said on Reddit and said, thanks. And they kind of got chatting, and then he ended up offering to beta.
1 week later, we were starting to work together. But
then Triage was next, and he wrote a lot of reviews with more details and stuff, and kind of went on, and I can't remember if they offered to beta or they joined Discord and we were chatting. I don't specifically remember how that happened, to be honest. I think there was a lot of reviews and then discussion, and then I offered to help.
Because I remember you asking me if I was okay with it.
Yeah, I wasn't going to upset, you were doing a good job and stuff, and so I wasn't going to be like, well, you're doing a pretty good job, I'm going to bring somebody else on,
That was so bad. God, that was so bad. But anyway.
That's why I thought I'd ask you first and then see, and yeah, he obviously came on and worked after you did. You would beta it, and then Triage would beta, and then we'd all sit and to figure out how to make an alliterative title for it. and then publish it.
And what about you? You've baited many people already, right?
Not many people. I've baited some. My beta work is more like, or at least how I see it, is I'm not really the greatest on the technical side, but more plot and like discussion and maybe some writing tips in total.
Mm-hmm.
So people have reached out and asked me, which apparently, according to you, I'm unapproachable.
You seem so, because everyone goes to me for some reason.
Well, there you go. So the people that have been willing to approach, have. I offered, I think, for Autumn Soul,
Yeah.
Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, she's on the Discord, but she was writing a crossover Harry Potter, and it's a femme Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings universe, and she's very knowledgeable about it. And she was looking for a beta, and she doesn't update very often. I said, if you update I'm not interested, but if you don't update too often, then I'd be helpful. And she doesn't need any help on the technical side. Autumn writes the technical side very, very well, very, very clean. So, on that side, it's more like trying to be helpful on, okay, you talked about this topic at the beginning, you've kind of covered it again towards the end here, or I noticed this, or just things I might pick out in, just second read through or second pair of eyes, or just, if she wants to message me about any stuff, that's more what I've done. There's a few other people in the Discord that have asked me, and I've read their things and provided feedback. Sometimes for some of the authors that I talked with or I've communicated with, I've read some of their stuff and provided feedback on things I notice about their fictions, or read it through quite a bit of it, or things I might suggest, or that I noticed maybe they could do better, or weak points, or what they were really strong at. Just sort of things I've more tried to provide. But again, I think the technical side of my writing is probably my weakest point still, and I have a lot to learn that way.
Easily. Well, not easily, but you can improve little by little.
Yeah, I don't view myself as like some crazy expert author or anything, or great fan fiction author. I just kind of see myself as I'd started, and I had some ideas that were popular and worked out well. And now I'm in a more novice-y stage where I'm, intermediate maybe, where I'm starting to figure things out a little more and having some more planning. But I think I've still got a long ways of improvement that I could go through.
Speaking of improvement, do you have any ideas for future projects besides Anguish? Because we're not gonna talk about Anguish.
Future project ideas?
Yeah.
Yeah, too many. I have too many.
Anyone
so part of like
you're willing to share?
Well, I'll share kind of one of them. I mean,
the Game of Thrones.
What I used to do, right, is that I used to just take these ideas and then I would just start working with them. And sometimes they would just pop up when I'm reading a story, and it kind of something would strike me, or I'd read a story and I didn't like what people were doing, or I just kind of think about things a bit. And one of them was like the idea that Sirius leaves the country after book 3. Like the Ministry is out to get him, and they believe he's out to murder Harry Potter. And Harry Potter apparently is entirely safe. He doesn't need any guards or oars or anything at Privet Drive because, again, he's perfectly safe.
Yeah.
But Sirius also could approach him there, right? Like, apparently House Elves can get there without problem. In fact, they can do a lot of magic there, and they don't even notice the magic, right? Like, Dobby didn't just, like, knock on the front door, walk through. Like, he used magic to get into the property. And only the hover charm, when he specifically intentionally did it to make it look like it was Harry, did that actually hit the trace.
Yeah.
So the magic system there, or like the magic, underrated magic program, whatever, like their wards or whatever, the Ministry's method of tracking underage magic doesn't really make sense in that. And so for Sirius, who wants to, spend time with his godson, why would he leave the country when the only place he won't be, apparently, is with Harry Potter because he's perfectly safe and doesn't need any help from the Ministry. And therefore, like, if Sirius wants to spend time with him, why wouldn't he visit him at Privet Drive? Like, he already did once. Apparently that was fine.
Yeah,
so why wouldn't he spend more time there? Like, the Ministry will never send an order to look there. They didn't for any of the other books. Only Dumbledore's order went there. So if he's looking for the safest place where the Ministry will never find him, I mean, that's with Harry. That's it. So, what would that look like? And, what other things? And, of course, at that point, I was still thinking a fair bit about magic systems with Harry Potter, like how the magic might actually function a little bit more. And at the time, I had a bit of a different idea than ITT, so I had some ideas for world building a bit of magic, and then taking Harry as far as schooling and stuff. That the Marauders were pretty obviously very good students. If James was head boy, and they also became Animagus underage, again apparently that's very difficult. So they must be excellent students that were a bit bored and goofed around, or were good enough students that they could get by with decent grades or pretty good grades because they were talented and smart to some degree at least, or had some degrees of ability to do above average. So my assumption would be that Sirius would be the kind of person that goofed around in their free time, but they also needed to be quite good at what they did to do pranking well, and so they generally would work ahead, or would be quite ahead in their abilities, smart. And so for Harry, the son of the head boy and head girl, both smart people, talented. He knows what people told him all growing up.
Yeah.
He's got more ability, so for Sirius basically to take him aside and get him to start growing up and trying harder and that kind of sort of fiction. And the reason I have never written it is because I'm really not interested in writing Harry stays in canon and then slowly makes changes where he works harder, he does better, he starts being better. It leads into this book 4 plotline. Well, there's not really a ton of changes that suddenly the 14-year-old Harry who tries hard is going to be this great magic, God could be this super competent person that can go in the graveyard and defeat Voldemort. So you have to stick somewhat to canon. And again, I'm not really...
ITT, so I
yeah.
see that.
And I'm just really not interested in writing, a slow progression, a rewrite of book 4, 5, 6, and 7, or, starting to make it slowly more AU all the way. I would need a plot, and I just don't really have any interest in writing a slightly that kind of sticks to canon. I'd want to go off the rails very quickly, and you need more than that. So again, that's when I talk about with ITT a mishmash of ideas, like that story starting point is there. And I could match it with other points that say pick up in 4th year or 5th year, or different magic systems or different world building ideas. I could mishmash them together to create a larger fiction, but at this time I wasn't really that interested, or didn't really quite have that going.
You spoke of world building, and then I remember, how did you come up with the Chamber of Secrets concept? How did you word build that into the ITT, and how do you usually go about brainstorming world building aspects of your stories?
Well, for the Chamber of Secrets one specifically, you've seen in some fan fictions where they have the Chamber of Use, where they have a portrait. Some will have, just knowledge that are hidden and Voldemort access, but Harry was the true heir, so he could go through and get his own stuff. I didn't really necessarily believe in the last one, and I didn't want a portrait. I kept portraits out of ITT pretty much entirely, because I didn't want a specific mentor for Harry that way. I mean, Salazar in the books was a mentor. Slughorn was a mentor. Cyrus was a mentor. I mean, lots of people in ITT were mentors for Harry.
Yeah.
But I didn't want a painting to be that, or caricature of what somebody was in real life. So I kept paintings entirely out of it. I wanted Harry to go on his own specific journey, so I wanted a system, when I thought about it, where there would be a way of learning and also a bit that Harry and Voldemort, or Riddle at the time, was obviously a genius student. He found this place that apparently nobody finds. You must be Parselmouth, and it didn't really make sense to me that, Voldemort is the only Parselmouth that searched and found this. Surely there must have been girls that were Parselmouths, right? And they probably were in that bathroom at some point, through the centuries and centuries and centuries since. Somebody would have probably found it. That's my assumption. They couldn't just be Riddle was the first person to find it since Salazar Slytherin. That just, to me, just seems ridiculous. Yeah. It's been, centuries of other Parselmouths. Riddle didn't become the first Parselmouth since Salazar. He came from the gods, and they were all Parselmouths, or a number of them were, and they could trace their lineage back, and, there would have been brothers and sisters and cousins that married into other families, that had it. So to me, it didn't make sense that the only person that found the chamber would be Tom Riddle. And so I had to think about that. What would that mean? Like, why would there not be all of these heirs of Slytherin? You know, why was Voldemort the one that's like, I am his proper heir, like his only heir?
Uh-huh.
And, you know, that was another concept to think about and to consider. So I just started to consider that other people had found it, that Voldemort was the first person that kind of became the heir, and then assumed that there'd be some kind of version of being able to prove yourself, like go through some kind of series of long tests and things like, or just learning. I mean, learning itself is a test, you know, to dedication and discipline, especially at the pace that Harry learned at in the fiction. And the pace he progressed, and Voldemort would have progressed when he was older as well. So I just spent a lot of time well, not a lot of time, I just kind of let my thoughts wander about that and think, you know, how could it work? And that's kind of the idea I came up with. That was what I ended up putting into ITT. And some of it was written off the cuff, you know, or a fair bit of it was written off the cuff. I mean, part of the initial stuff, like all the early chapters, I kind of thought out ahead of time. Mm-hmm. But again, you know, there was a goal of where I wanted Harry to be in the end. There was what Voldemort would have gone through on a journey, and they'd end up in two completely opposite places going through the same journey, the exact same system, getting to 49 rituals and going through all the training, and they came out completely differently. One is a monster and one is not a monster, or, you know, the wizarding world wouldn't probably see him at that. He probably did some monstrous things, or some things that are a bit despicable in the fiction, but, you know, he wasn't Voldemort. He doesn't have this ability to, you know, want to dominate and take over the world and create all these followers like Voldemort. So I wanted, you know, that as a goal and a waypoint to write towards always. So that kind of kept things focused, even though at points he got lost in focus for sure, and, you know, wandered off and meandered off the path and wrote too many words and got distracted with side plots. But that was always kind of there from the beginning, very early on.
I have to ask for Patrick, because I have to ask for him. Why didn't you show the 49th ritual?
The 49th ritual?
Yeah.
Because the rituals were all the way through. The mechanics of them were more important than the actual rituals. I think the dragon ritual is the only one that I really kind of showed anything of. But I wasn't going to go and show 49 different rituals. I didn't want it to be on the different ingredients and, you know, coming up with all that.
Was the most important one, according to Dumbledore and according to, well, everyone who was talking about the stabilization of his magic. So why not show even a little bit about the 49th ritual?
Really come into consideration. I didn't show any of the other ones. Mm-hmm. Why would I start with just the last one? That doesn't really make sense to me. It was more about the journey of Harry and his characters. So, you know, fan fiction's a bit of a funny place where, you know, people want to see everything. I got PMs saying, can you write a scene, you know, where Harry sees Draco again and destroys him? What? Like, not actually that, but like, no, people want to see like the everyday mundane. Like, they love to just like find out what Harry does, like specifically all day, every day. Like, he woke up, he went to the bathroom, he's now showered, and what kind of shower? Describe it in detail. Like, want that information. You know, not everybody. And so fanfiction's this really weird place where, like, normally you're cutting all this information out of your writing, but then you have people asking for this extra crazy information that has nothing to do with the plot, the characters, or anything. They just want to know. Mm-hmm. So you can add stuff. Books, I see them as kind of two different mediums. I mean, they're very similar. They have similar aspects, but they're very different mediums. And the way the message comes across is generally by the medium.
Gotcha. Just a silly question. Where did your love for alliterations come from? How did you start?
Yeah, mostly like for ITT, I didn't really take it very seriously. You know, I was trying to just have fun. Mm-hmm. You know, I was trying to see if I enjoyed writing. I was trying to see if I, you know, could stick with it and finish a fiction. I was just trying to see if, you know, like, sometimes you start hobbies in the first couple months, it's pretty fun, and then the real work to improve kind of kicks in, and you're like, well, am I really that dedicated? No, I'm not. Okay, back to other things, right? So I wasn't sure about writing, and so I never took it very seriously, even when I was finishing it. It's not like, wow, this is popular, and I should really try hard now. It was just, let's just keep trying to have fun and be silly sometimes and do stupid things, and alliterations just kind of became part of it, where they're just kind of silly to say, they're kind of fun to come up with, and there's nothing really crazy about it other than there's just a bit of silly fun. And so I started doing it, and then you do kind of 3 words, and you think, well, what about 4 and 5, and then eventually you get 13, 16 words, and you just keep going with it.
Yeah. I think it's been...
Oh, and I got an early review saying, like, stop it. Like, stop those, or like, alliterations, I think. And I was like, cool, I'm going to do more. Right, I mean, I'm just trying to have fun, so if the guy's like, you should stop that, I'm going to think, that was fun, let's do more of it. So I doubled down and did way more.
Of course.
Of course.
Since it's getting late, if you could give your readers advice for them if they want to become writers, what would you give them? What do you think is the best thing to focus on as a starting writer, aspiring writer?
Just start doing it, really. You don't really know what kind of writer you're going to be until you get started. I mean, I learned a lot and changed how I wrote as I went through things. You know, just get started, and you can find people that are willing to help you that have more experience. But a lot of it is just get going on it and just start writing. You know, you don't know what your strengths of your writing are until you really start writing. I started figuring out what people liked about my fictions, not until, 15, 20, 30 chapters, that people really like this and they really like that in my writing. And then I started to learn more about where my strengths were, and also, where my weaknesses were and where I could improve. So that's the biggest thing. I think as far as an advice to start, what to do, I would say just try and think of writing something that's interesting, something that has, tension.
For you or for the reader?
For the reader and for yourself. I mean, when I was reading, I was trying to write it as if I wanted to read it, right? If I was wanting to read this, what would I want to see as part of it? That's part of, like, the goal was kind of to write something that's fun, but also something that I might enjoy reading. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to write something you would enjoy reading, like, what do you like in it? What would you like to see? And tension is something that just, I don't mean tension so much as, like, add a cliffhanger every chapter to build tension, or constantly have action scenes to build tension, because all of those things become repetitive and boring. I mean, if you've seen the show 24, you see Jack Bauer in constant tension where he's always in action scenes and getting shot at by terrorists. And it's like, by episode 3, you're like, cool, but, like, he's not going to die. And then they kill off that brand new character they just added, and you're like, cool, but again, there's no tension because that person you just introduced I know is going to get killed off, so it's no big deal. Or somebody else will get killed off. Like, they lose that ability. If you reuse the same device over and over, you lose the tension. But there's lots of ways to add tension or draw interest. Like, a reader can be really interested in wanting to flip the pages to figure out a character's backstory. They can be really interested in, like, how a relationship is going to work out, or the character's been thinking about this upcoming event and they want to know, they're worried or anxious about it, and, like, is that justified? Like, what is going to happen there? Like, there's so many different ways to build interest in your writing, with your characters, with your plot, just the style of writing. Like, you can withhold information from the reader that the characters know and the readers want to know it, and all you've done is just hidden information. So, there's those fictions where they start off and they basically write out, like, Harry's upset for these things, and here's his 10-point plan to, like, world domination, and then there's 10 straight chapters of, like, point 1, point 2, point 3, and you're like, you gave away the entire plot in the first chapter. Like, what's the point of reading? Like, keep some information hidden, try and use different devices in different times, relationships. But again, like, if you're reading a romance and it's constant, like, they break up, get back together, they break up to get back together, or, like, they misunderstand each other where he says something. Like, there's actually a good one. You can misconvey things, right? Like, I was in the washroom and the person came in to clean it, and it was a woman, and opened the door, and so I said to my wife as a joke, a woman, this person that she knew, walked in on me in the washroom. And so in her mind, she's going to immediately go, like, oh my goodness, like, I was in a stall or something, right? Mm-hmm. But obviously I'd finished cleaning my hands, and I had just finished putting the paper towel away in the trash can, and I was literally walking out the door. So she walked on me in the washroom is a very disingenuous statement that's provocative and trying to do that. So if you're just constantly doing that over and over in between the relationship and the characters, where you're just using those kind of, like, Harry's walking with, and he happens to grab Padma's hand when she's falling, and oh my goodness, Daphne sees that Harry is holding Padma's hand. Like, that gets so boring so quickly. Like, you can have one or two of those, but if you do that chapter after chapter after chapter, it's like, just go and shoot me. I'm just so bored. There's nothing going on. So you got to just think of that. I think tension is, is interesting. It's good to try and create interest and draw interest, and just try and think about, why do people want to continue reading your story? Sometimes it's great world building, sometimes it's characterization, sometimes it's relationships, but just try and think of, what would draw people's interest and get them to be like, I want to turn the page, or I'd like to read that more when I'm not busy.
Okay. And if you could recommend a story you like to everyone, what would it be?
Like, that's not my own?
That is not your own, of course. Or mine.
Well, grow young with me then.
Okay.
Obviously it's mine, but that's fine.
Obviously. Okay,
like an actual fiction?
yeah, maybe something that people might not know, like something more obscure. That
I don't know, I haven't really been reading a lot recently.
It doesn't have to be fanfiction.
Not fan fiction. Well, most recent things I've been reading that aren't fan fiction are the Silmarillion, which I'm not sure I'm going to recommend to people. It's good reading if you want to slog through it, but it's not the funnest of reading first, second, or third time.
Yeah.
I've been reading Baron of Luthien. That's what I've been reading recently.
The
It's more interesting, a bit more novelish, but yeah, it's not exactly the greatest. I'm not sure I'd recommend that either. So yeah, I don't really have a crazy recommendation at the moment.
That's
I haven't been reading much.
We'll go with Grow Young with me.
Wait. No, there is one that I did read recently.
Oh.
I should probably shout it out because they're amazing at self-promotion.
Uh-huh.
1 second, I'm just going to make sure I get the title right. Because I don't always get the titles right.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Underneath the Sky is the name of the fanfiction.
Okay.
And it's great. It has a character that you would not expect in it.
Which is?
From their point of view, it's just not a typical character you'd see.
Okay. That's a good recommendation then.
Do you know what story that is?
I do know which one that is. Yes.
You don't know it?
I do know.
Oh, you do know.
Yes, I do.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Sal, and taking your time to talk about a bit about fanfic and your past. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.